In our Mastering Copilot Governance series, we are going to be talking about the Power Platform side of the house. So, we're kind of moving away from the control center and some of the like the reporting and ins and outs that Michael mentioned on the M365, in the M365 admin world, and getting into those standalone agents, those Copilot Studio agents. And a lot of that is grounded in the governance tools that we've had for quite a long time in the Power Platform, but we also then have a number of layered governance and security controls over top of that core Power Platform governance footprint. So what I would like to do is for everybody here, whether you're now an agent vet, which I guess would be a year or two of doing this, or you're a newbie or you're coming in fresh and want to understand a little bit about what that core governance conversation sounds like when it comes to the Power Platform. We're going to cover that along with the, kind of breaking down the agent landscape. It's a lot. So how can we make some sense of this leading into that core governance conversation, then leading into the agent governance? So when it comes to agents specifically, when it comes to Copilot Studio specifically, what should we be mindful of? What are those controls, and how do we traverse this conversation? We'll then cap off with capacity and cost management. So a quick hit on the two different types, two different means of the cost implications, or the prepaid versus the pay-as-you-go approach to getting these agents off the ground. And then I put together a top 10, and the top 10 is going to be a collection of things that we kind of cover through the core conversation a couple of times, but a lot of maybe lesser known facts or things to be mindful of when we're talking core governance, cost governance, and I threw in some advanced governance concepts into the mix too. And then at the end, I do have some resources and calls to action that we'll visit. But first, and right off the bat, the agent landscape. And I'm sure maybe one or two of you in the room have heard the word Copilot or have uttered the word agent a time or two, maybe just a couple of times over the last weeks, months, or now years. But when you zoom out, instead of thinking about these pockets of technology, when you take a look at the whole landscape and moving from left to right, that's kind of like the logical flow here. We start with the more out of the box. That's a little bit of a misnomer. There's obviously configuration, there are security governance implications, there are things to be mindful of, but these are the copilots that are built into M365. These are the sidecar helpers that you find in VS Code, GitHub Copilot, Security Copilot. Then we start to get into that agent conversation. So agents being able to support a business process. And that's a big message here is copilots are for people. Copilots are for you. Agents are for processes. So when we're talking critical business processes, actually, working with data or being able to support tasks or a sequence across an end-to-end business process, that's where we start to think about, starting with Copilot Chat, SharePoint, M365 Copilot agents, using that powered by Copilot Studio or that agent light builder. Then we get into kind of the middle ground here, and that's where we have our low to pro code Power Platform. So we're sandwiched between the more or less the turn the keys and go, the productivity tools, the near and dear and the familiar with Microsoft 365, and then the other end of the spectrum, Azure and Foundry and all of the more advanced pro code tools that we can use to build something floor to ceiling, manage it, maintain it. It's ours. We deploy it. It's IP. We have that low code. We have the Power Platform right in the middle there to be able to leverage, employ something like Copilot Studio as our front door or as a rapid agent development deployment platform versus having to do everything in a bespoke fashion. We control everything, we develop everything, we code everything, we maintain and support and patch everything on the far right hand side of the spectrum with all those tools. But the big story here, take away all of that noise, take away the logos and the mentions and the arrows and the treasure map that's required to follow along all these copilots and agents. And really what we're looking at is the agent orchestration for today's purposes. When we're thinking about Copilot Studio, we'll be living in that orchestration layer and talking about how to govern that and the tools that we have at our fingertips to do so. But when we take away the noise, the big message is that Microsoft provides you an agentic platform. So not simply a prescriptively or purpose-built agent that you turn on, that your users use, the ability to do that and build your own and incorporate third-party agents. And so as there is this agent proliferation across your organization, Microsoft is very uniquely positioned to be able to support all of those that you're building with Copilot Studio, with Copilot chat agents or M365 Copilot agents or Azure AI Foundry agents, as well as those third parties, as well as the productivity, the business process, and any other purpose or persona-driven agent that you might incorporate across your agent landscape. So we have those foundations. We don't want to be the wrench in your architectural spokes. We want to play nice with anybody like a service. ServiceNow has some great agent capabilities. UiPath has some great agent capabilities, and so we get to manage these and govern these and monitor these, whether they're a 1P or a 3P agent, with all of the security and governance foundations, like you saw with Michael last time around, like we're about to see today, because that's really where we're going to drill in, is Power Platform specific governance concepts. And if you're not familiar with the Power Platform, if you're not familiar with kind of where Copilot Studio sits on the level, it's beside things like you may have heard of Power Apps or Power Automate. So rapid application development, hyper automation capabilities spanning from digital process automation all the way through RPA and computer vision, Power Pages for portal capabilities, Power BI for analytics. But Copilot Studio is another spoke in that low code to pro code wheel. And then we've got all those data services and connectors and the ability to flip on managed environments to get advanced administrative controls. And the beauty of building in Copilot Studio and leveraging Dataverse, which is the underlying data store and services, kind of that data chassis that underpins all of these tools, is that we've got these controls from tenant level all the way down to column level. So we can protect our builds, our assets, our agents with conditional access at the Azure level, with virtual Azure VNet, private endpoints, service principal use. And then as you start to look at the lower layers here, you bring that down to the environment level. We've got, which we're going to zoom in on quite a bit here today, environment settings, environment groups, rules that pertain to those environment groups, whether those are development environments, production environments, personal developer environments, you name it. We've got, resource permissions. We've got down at the, literally the column level, we have data masking. We have column level, roll-ups, conditions, and security around that. And then when we think about data transit, where are we getting the data from? Where are we pushing that data to? We do have the inbound and outbound restrictions. We can set up firewalls. We've got IP configs that we can lean on as well. So truly, from tenant down to environment, down to person or persona or user, down to the column and how and where and by which means we're accessing and working with data, we have controls to be able to address this. But for today's purposes, the big focus of conversation that Michael and I have really kind of fleshed out over the last number of months comes down to the features that you get with managed environments. So when you flip managed environments on, always recommend that. There are some licensing implications, but with Copilot Studio, you do get managed environment entitlements. So if you're building with Studio, do know that you have the ability to turn managed environments on. But when you do so, you get a lot more of those administrative controls, like I mentioned, starting with environment groups. So, once we'll talk about the big needs, like developing an environment strategy that is Number one, we actually have a top 10 coming up. So I'm going to talk through that a little bit more in depth in a little while here. But when you have those managed environments flipped on, you can group those environments. So whether you have a number of departments that are running proofs of concept, or maybe you have a layer of developer and development, collaborative development environments that you'd like to group and manage, you can do this at scale. So you can take those groups of environments. This is an example of up to 300,000 developer environments. The key here is managing these environments at scale. So you can apply these rules, like the ability to share out and what the behavior is with Copilot Studio agents, or new model use or adoption, or how users would be routed or accessing these different environments. You can group them, manage them with a set of rules. We'll take a look at this live, and then you can layer in environment routing. So a lot of our customers are rightfully, and in a very warranted way, worried about business side folks coming in and accessing collaborative developer environments that are owned or managed by IT. They are concerned about, or a big consideration is the onboarding experience, getting people resources, and being able to control where and how people are building and developing these studio agents. So when you have managed environments turned on, when you have those rules established, you can set up environment routing such that if somebody goes to make.powerapps.com, or goes to the Copilot Studio designer URL, they would get routed to, instead of hitting the collaborative IT team development box or that environment, they would be routed to their own personal developer environment. And so it sequesters all of that away into a controlled and managed environment in an automated way. So you don't have to go through a lengthy approval process. You don't have to manually provision an environment. A lot of that automation is on the back end, scripted, ready to go. And we've got a few settings that you can flip on to be able to do that. But the big asterisk here is that this is a part of managed environments. And that is really where we're driving in all of our conversations today. So we think about the environments themselves. What is that overall strategy? Are you going to be flipping on managed environments, using environment routing, and then applying those rules? That's really kind of the foundation or the basis for much of that agent governance footprint. But the other big part of that is not just where people are going to be building and being able to control and manage that effectively at scale, but then what do they have access to? That's potentially the biggest thing, is which connectors should we afford our agent builders? On screen here you can see the slate of, we're talking data loss prevention policies here. So be the ability to either block or organize and categorize different connectors, the ability to tap into OneDrive, SharePoint, Salesforce, Dynamics 365, Oracle DBs, on-prem SQL. Should we, ought we, and who should we give that access to? Those things are all defined by these data loss prevention policies. And these layer, you can have tenant-wide DLP is sort of a baseline, and I can get into the screens and we can take a look at this in a second, but you can have baseline tenant-wide policies. You can apply layered policies that have fewer restrictions or fewer blocked connectors to various environments, to different environments, or even have a DLP policy that excludes certain environments. So you can get quite granular with the DLP structure and effectiveness across your entire tenant or specific environments. And when we think about having an effective governed foundation in the Power Platform, this is I would say a crude but pretty effective checklist here. So these are kind of the big rocks. Number one, develop a governance strategy. I can't stress that enough. None of these controls mean a thing unless you understand why you're doing what you're doing and with which environments in the Power Platform. So when you're building Copilot Studio full agents, you should not be building in the default environment. There may be a number of you out there that are. So consider breaking out agentic innovation or designer development, either in like an agent's POC standalone environment or building an environment stack just for agent innovation, or if you have that developer, dev, test, UAT, prod type of stack of environments, consider either an adjacent agent environment that feeds into that test environment, or really think about and talk with your teams, socialize with your IT teams and your governance teams or owners, what this environment footprint should look like. Where should certain people be building? When should they be trying to deploy and test? That will set the stage for everything else downstream. So if you haven't had that conversation already, do it today. Do it this week. Do it early next week. We're in Q2 at Microsoft, so make it a Q2 priority. Make it a this month priority, because I can tell you right now, and Michael, I think you can attest, if those pieces aren't in place, if those dominoes are not lined up to knock down and go light speed with agent development and deployment, we have to go back to the root. We have to go back to square one and define that before we can really get a lot of traction. We don't want to stifle agentic innovation by any means. So there are some easy wins, quick wins that we can do. Build your own environment, go build in there. We can control that. But it really would behoove a lot of people, a lot of organizations, to get these governance conversations going now, if they aren't already, to then start to think about what kind of guardrails you want, what kind of internal maker communities you'd like to build. Do we have a baseline tenant strategy for some of these tenant level settings? Getting into not just the baseline DLP policies, but as these different environments start popping up, honing and tailoring additional DLP policies, layered DLP policies to really lean on that least restrictive sort of approach. And then, monitor that, be able to see the usage patterns, be able to see the consumption, and then keep evolving, keep refining that strategy across your environments. Now, that is a lightning quick, really high level conversation about what to be mindful of when it comes to Power Platform governance as sort of that core governance layer. But what about agents specifically? So that's cool, Adam, but we are here to think about maybe we have all of that in pocket. We're good, we're comfortable. Our maturity when it comes to Power Platform in general, core governance, is pretty mature, pretty solid. We're looking for guidance on what to be mindful of when it comes to building and deploying and managing, maintaining, monitoring agents. So when we take that next step, when we think about agents specifically and the controls and security governance concepts that we need to be mindful of when it comes to building Copilot Studio agents in particular, this is kind of a top-down breakdown of the various features that are GA right now, are in public preview, so you can get hands-on, but they're still in that preview phase, so subject to change, updates, that sort of thing, and then coming soon. So on the roadmap, hint, hint, wink, wink, you're going to want to tune into Ignite because there will be a lot of announcements and a lot of updates. But this kind of breaks down the features, functionalities when it comes to limiting access to data. So we already talked about DLP, but here are some other mechanisms or tools that we can tap into. So the standard security roles, and then you can see the coming soon on the bottom left there. So privileged identity management, so limiting access and kind of capping some of that. Data exfiltration, we talked a little bit about DLP again. That comes up quite a bit because that controls quite a bit. But then, we've got more advanced capabilities to throw into the mix, like prompt injection attacks and those threat detection mechanisms that we can tap into, whether that's first-party defender or third party that you're bringing yourself. Compliance and regulation, we can tap into customer managed keys, data compliance. And so I'm not going to read through everything, but this is a good breakdown of, you look at those main topics across the top of the different tools we can use, the different approaches that we have, and what you can employ or leverage when you're building these agents after you've taken that first step of setting your proper governance foundation. And the way that my brain thinks about this is, that's cool, but this is noisy. Make it real, make it practical, make it meaningful for us. I like to think about almost everything in like a concentric circle pattern. So the innermost, the smallest, the most direct things that we can control is at the agent level. So when we're in a particular agent, we can, as makers or as developers of that agent, control who has access to it for co-development. So if I wanted to share that, like on screen you see here, if I wanted to toggle or bring, here's Deborah as our example, but bring another developer in, bring another analyst in, maybe bring a UAT tester into Copilot Studio to get hands-on with it. I have that ability to bring in, both as a viewer and an editor, groups, security groups of folks or individuals to be able to access that agent. So you can control the access at the agent level. And then you also have, you can see the proactive notifications here. And I think I'll probably just show this live because it didn't do a great job of capturing that in the screen that was on a second ago. But if I go to share here, you can see what I'm talking about. So we have the access controls, but then we actually also have those proactive notifications that will pop up top here. So just giving you that wherewithal, giving you as an individual maker that insight into what could possibly bite me, or what do I need to be thinking about, not just in terms of the agent build and who has access to it, but those connectors or tools that might be a part of that agent. You can see that it's billboarding for me that this is going across my organization. And then these right here, I've got autonomous triggers as a part of this agent. And as it turns out, the tools that autonomous trigger or the autonomous agent is leveraging, both the triggers for those autonomous scenarios and the additional connectors that I have for my knowledge sources or other like agent flows, whatever might be in the recipe for this agent, I am using the author's credentials. So, being very aware, hyper aware of the access that you're granting other individuals or security groups as you're bringing them into the fold at the agent level is provided right within Copilot Studio, the UI there. So at the agent level, you've got not just a couple of controls, but also proactive notifications and some sense of the footprint of that agent or how pervasive that could be from a data access perspective. Moving up a level, this is where we have environment level agent governance. So there are studio controls, there are other Copilot, like Copilot that lives in Power Apps or other tools. You have those environment level settings within the environment itself. We'll talk about the environment group settings in a second, but you can toggle those. So on screen, you can see the access to transcripts. People are looking for sentiment, they're looking for reports, they're looking for feedback, they're looking for, agent optimization data, something that we can use in a roll forward fashion to refine this as people adopt it and use it. Credential options. So when you're actually in an environment, we'll flip over to the Power Platform Admin Center. When you're in an environment here, and I'll go into my agent developer environment, you'll get your top line information, the URL, security groups, roles, wave, is the most recent wave update turned on. So you get this top line breakdown in your environment, but then you can go to settings up top. Now this is after, imagine, if you will, a world where you and your team have determined your governance strategy, your environment strategy. So you've got maybe a traditional developer UAT test production stack that you're working in. And then maybe you went, you know what, that's really good. We're going to push all agent development into its own agent developer environment. And we need to toggle a couple of settings here. You can go to those environment settings, go to features, and right off the bat in the top left of the feature functionality page here that renders in a second, you'll be able to see some of those controls that were on screen a second ago. So like I said, Copilot in Power App settings, but then down here, we've got our agent settings for the environment itself. So access to transcripts, credential options. If you are tapping into, if you're maybe using Dataverse MCP for Model Context Protocol for any of those AI tools or access, this is where you can set some of those configs, set some of those governance settings at the environment level specifically. And the really nice part is that now with managed environments and with these environment groups, we can be a heck of a lot more effective at scale. So say you turned on environment routing, say you have 10, 20, 40, 100, 400 people now in their own developer environments. Hey, you need to control that, and you need to control that with ease and simplicity. And that's what environment groups are all about, is being able to take all those developer environments or take all of your agent developer, collaborative developer environments, or UAT environments, or production environments, and be able to manage them almost like we just saw at an individual environment level, but across that pool of environments. So if we go take a look at how that looks and feels within the Power Platform Admin Center here, you can see I've got all of these different types of environments. So the agents dev one is the one we were just in. That's a sandbox. I've got a number of sandboxes in the mix. I've also got some developer environments. So, there's Deborah again showing up. I've got my own down here. And then we've got our prod boxes that are in the mix as well. And then, hey, there's our old trusty default environment down at the bottom. But as you move to the right side of the screen, you can see whether those environments are managed or not with this managed column. And then further down, you can see which group they're in. So this is the environment group that each of these environments belongs to. And this is how I manage these groups of environments at scale. So I got my POC boxes, I've got my dev boxes, production, and this is how you manage them. Environment groups on the left-hand side. I'll go pop in there. And you can see those labels, those groups that we just saw on screen a second ago. So as an example, if I go into my POC environments where my agent's dev environment lives, this is where I can see the scope of the environments that are under this POC environments umbrella. But this is really where I want to live. And this is what I wanted to show the team here is rules. So this is where we can set some of those environment level governance and security and behavior configs, but across and at scale. So if I go scroll all the way down here we have some agent specific settings here. So sharing agents with editor and viewer permissions, this is where we can toggle some of those settings, and that then applies to and updates those settings across all of those environments under that POC environments umbrella. So we have a lot more agility, we have a lot more ease, a lot more simplicity when it comes to managing effectively agent building governance at scale across any of these different pools of environments, which is very powerful. That next level up is tenant. So we've worked from the agent to the environment to the environment group. Now we're all the way at the tip top at the tenant level. And this is where we can, this is across all environments. So these are baselines across your entire tenant, as the name implies. A couple of things I wanted to call out here when we go to tenant settings, and so you kind of have that sequence, that build up getting to the tenant settings on the left over here. We'll tuck that away from our screen real estate. You do have a couple of things that might impact agent development and design in this list. Number one, if you have worked with it, it's a little bit of a preview or a spoiler. This makes my top 10 list, but Copilot Studio authors, this is where you can point to a specific security group. Here I have the Contoso Agent Innovators. So anybody that I want to be hands-on with Copilot Studio building that, whether that's an IT person, whether that is business side, process owner, SME, or analyst, we can throw them into that security group and they would then have access to start building in Copilot Studio. This is a lot easier than using the traditional method, from even a year ago of assigning the $0 license in the M365 admin portal. That's a bit laborious, and that's per head per user, unless you're using scripting or some advanced management capabilities or techniques. It's pretty cumbersome. So with this, you drop them into that security group. you point the authors to that security group, and away you go. A couple of others that might make the cut here: desktop flow actions in DLP policies. So if your agent is going to be tunneling into a machine or going and executing either computer vision or RPA workloads, well, it really would be the RPA workloads. Do you want to incorporate those RPA actions that you can invoke and execute through Power Automate Desktop? Do you want to incorporate that in your DLP policies? I have that certifiably set to yes, because I do have that baked into some of my policies and restricting that from some of my environments. So another one to call out there. And then the last one, this is another one that makes the top 10 list, but hosted browser, computer use, the next genesis of RPA, being able to use generative capabilities to execute RPA or UI flows, but less prescriptively, and using instruction and natural language versus drag and drop configuration. That's what computer use is all about. It's that next evolution of RPA using LLMs in the background. This is where we can set it to either a hosted image that it runs and executes through, or if we're bringing our own machine, that's where we can keep those that setting off. But these tenant level settings also definitely play into your overall governance approach and some of the controls that you have. So moving on from the agent environment group and tenant level settings, what about cost? What about pricing? I'm sure all of you.
Adam, really quick.
Oh, yeah.
You have a little time for some Q&A?
We certainly do. I just thought it was boring the room, and let's do it. Let's jump in.
All right, we've got a comment from Chris in here. So we talked a little bit about the environment managed environments and tenants. So I don't know if you've got access to Q&A, but I'll kind of Copilot summaries of this. So organization is currently looking for some governance with Copilot Studio that possibly works with the rest of the Power of platforms. So, and he gives an example of environment routing personal dev environments to a single environment where enterprise scale build is reviewed to a chosen production environment, whether existing or need to build. So do you have some thoughts on that? Like what is best practice around? It sounds like more like managing those environments and kind of back to your sandbox to dev to collaboration, stuff like that.
Yeah. So, Chris, I see your question. Fantastic question. We could probably have spent this whole session on like just your question and thinking about patterns, different approaches to managing specific environments or environment stacks. If I'm reading this correctly, you're contemplating using the environment routing. That's awesome. And then being able to take those assets and push all of those to a single consolidated developer environment. That's actually the pattern that I recommend for folks starting with environment routing and developer environments. That's one side of the story. So you have, if you can sort of visualize n number of all these developer environments, that could be 1, 2, 10, 50, 100, that's the 5,000 people that have their own developer environments. And then you're going to point all of those at a single, maybe IT managed or IT owned vetted environment. That is awesome. One thing you will have to, the other side of the story here is one thing you'll have to consider is how you will be deploying those assets to that shared or collaborative developer environment. We don't have a spot on it today because it's more ALM and deployment related, but we do have a native pipelines capability such that I'll just show you. If I'm in my agent, say I can be in my personal developer environment. I'll go flip over to my personal dev environment. And actually, I don't even know if I have any agents in here. Let's see. I mean, all right, employee self-service. Sure. I'll jump into that one. I'm in my dev box and I go, you know what? Now it's time to elevate and have IT sort of take the baton, vet a few things, go into some settings and make sure the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, and everything going up that environment stack to production is all set and well. So when I want to deploy this, if I go to share here, well, that's fun. Use the classic sharing. I can show a quick screen here. There we go. So if I'm a developer in my personal developer environment, I've got a rock solid agent. This thing is awesome. It's going to provide a ton of value for my organization. I can go and start with a couple of clicks. This is the value of native Power Pipelines. I can start that deployment process, and that will allow me to push this agent to that collaborative IT managed environment. So there are onboard means of doing exactly what you're asking and describing or considering internally. And this is the kind of the lighter weight approach, we'll say, because some of our customers are leveraging full CI/CD. They're leveraging Power Platform CLI, so command line interface and scripting, all of these sorts of things. Maybe they're leveraging DevOps pipelines. So it can get quite robust, but do know that the vision that you just highlighted in chat is 100% supported with native tooling to take all of those asset builds, those agent builds, point them to a particular IT managed environment, and then have IT take the baton and run it up the development stack.
Thanks, Adam. One more question before I let you get back to it. So we got a question. Can I confirm my understanding? Our Copilot Studio user license is no longer needed. We can add someone to a security group and then as a Copilot Studio author instead. Is that accurate?
Accurate.
Thumbs up. Cool.
Accurate. In terms of how to get somebody hands-on with Copilot Studio, that is the preferred method now, is adding them to. I had that Agent Innovators security group, but you go into as a revisit here, you go into your tenant settings, you go into your Copilot Studio authors setting here, you fly that open, and this is where you designate the security group that you would like to be able to access Copilot Studio. So 100%.
Thanks, Adam. We'll try to we'll continue managing the QA, but you're back at it. Appreciate it.
Perfect. I'm going to fly through cost just because we've got the top 10 to still knock out, and there might be some other questions that come through. This is the lightning round on cost. You have prepaid or you have pay as you go. So you can prepay, they're now called credits. This is outdated as of what, Michael, is it 3 weeks ago, a month ago? They're now Studio credits. Yeah. So Microsoft does love to rebrand. It's a thing. So we have prepaid message packs that you can reserve. You can also wire up particular environments to hit a pay-as-you-go meter on the back end. I will say right now that the message packs, when you stack up on like a per message basis, is a little cheaper when you look at some of the cost and volume. But to help with looking at some of the cost and volume, we do have the estimator tool. So if you take a look at this, I don't know if I'll be able to copy live here, but aka.ms/Copilot Studio Estimator will get you to the tool. So a lot of what what an agent is going to cost comes down to how it's designed and the tools that it's leveraging. So it's not a fixed cost. It's very dynamic. It takes into account expected user population. So number of messages and sessions, kind of t-shirt sizing this. It takes into account whether this is internal, external. It takes into account whether this is set to generative orchestration mode, so generative actioning, or the classic, more topic-based, more chatbot-like structure internally. So it takes those design concepts and rolls that into an estimated message capacity. So it gives you, how many messages it anticipates that it will need, and you can translate that then to cost. But when you have agents that are off the ground, you can see in real time what those capacity burns look like. So you can, in one area, see any of those pay-as-you-go billing plans that you have kicked up. You can see all of your purchased and assigned or allocated messages in one place. You can see on a per agent basis, you can see on a per environment basis, how those agents are consuming across your organization, and be able to make informed decisions from there. So this is ready to go. This is generally available. And this is kind of the same thing. So I'll show you live here. If I go into the Copilot page, go to Studio. What I want to do is actually go to licensing and go to Copilot Studio. So I'm in licensing and Copilot Studio, and this is where I have all of that reach and all of that visibility. So if I wanted to see and manage my billing plans, you can see that I've got my prod agents against one plan and my test agents against another. They each have their own environment scope. So for my production agents that are being used live by end users, I have my production environment and my center of excellence environment because those are active and ready and being used in prod scenarios. But then I've got my test PayGo policy, which covers my test box and a project management POC environment that's in the mix. So you can see your billing plans. You can see your agents. If I go to manage agents here, this is where we can take things down to an even more granular level. And you can see not just the allocated messages and limits over off to the right-hand side, as well as the billed or consumed credits that are in the mix. But if I go into any individual agent here, I can actually set the upper limit threshold. And then I have overage scenario settings. So if this agent goes over 10,000 Copilot credits, do I stop it? Is that the intended pattern that we want internally? Or do we consume from the tenant pool, because all of these credits are pooled at the tenant level, and then you allocate them to environments or particular agents. So you need to decide what you'd like what that behavior is going to be like, and then you can actually set some of these notifications. So if it hits 70% of this 10,000 pool, so if it hits 7,000 credits burned, it's going to be sending a message to the admins in the Power Platform Admin Center that your threshold has been reached. So you can be much more proactive on a per agent basis and environment basis with some of these settings. And if you are wiring up a pay-as-you-go plan, a billing plan for this, you can see on the back end that Azure spend. So as it hits that meter over time, you'll be able to go ahead and access that against your existing Azure subscription. And of course, in the Power Platform Admin Center, you can download all of these consumption reports to your heart's content. All right, I'm gonna do a quick Q&A because here's the top 10. I don't see anything, Michael. I think we're in good standing.
Yeah, we're in standing right now.
Perfect. All right. Well, this is great. So top 10. I wish I had like a Letterman style, or I don't know, some like more production value, but unfortunately, squad, you get some dry PowerPoint slides. But these are and Michael, I didn't even pop the hood on this for you. So like this took a little noodling. It was like, what are those big questions, or maybe more meaningful questions, or maybe more niche questions or concepts when it comes to agent specific governance that I think people should be aware of and mindful of. So starting with number one, develop an agents inclusive environment strategy. I've mentioned that a couple of times already, but take a look at what you've got in the Power Platform. Are you all living in just the default environment? You should change that tomorrow. Do you have one dev environment and one prod environment? Maybe think about introducing a UAT, an intermediary that's much closer to production for UAT and more formalized and structured and controlled UAT motions and testing motions and quality motions. So consider environment routing. Consider the agent dedicated environments that are maybe a sidestep that merge back into your main environment stack to accelerate some of that innovation. And then one nugget I put in here, and this is something Michael and I have talked about a little bit here recently, is if you have people that are building in the light experience, an M365 Copilot agent builder, what is the approach to maybe take some of that innovation, and if it needs to get to the enterprise level, what is your approach for that? And the last one here is evaluate and update DLP policies regularly. Copilot Studio is updating weekly, monthly, quarterly. Right? The pace of development and updates and change is breakneck at times. So as more DLP controls are being introduced, as more capability when it comes to restricting those or controlling those is introduced, evaluate that. Like, get a monthly cadence, get a quarterly cadence, get a semi-annual cadence, depending on how mature or robust your environment footprint is, and make sure that you're revisiting that as more and more connectors are introduced to that connector economy and as more capabilities rolled into Copilot Studio. Number two, be mindful of agent governance in other Power Platform tools. The first one that comes to mind is Power Apps. So the ability for somebody on a Canvas app to drop in a Copilot control for an agentic experience or a conversational experience, or in Power Pages, the ability for somebody to drop in a website-specific agent that then can actually expand its capability when you're in Copilot Studio. So, not like direct controls when it comes to controlling or governing studio agents specifically, but kind of adjacently how those agents behave in other spaces or other tools. Just be mindful of that because the Power Platform is not just incredible when it comes to building conversational agents or autonomous agents, but also with low-code apps and automation and portals and all these other things. So as agents are being adopted and maybe introduced or leveraged in other tools, just keep that in mind and how you might approach using some of those agents, those agent components in other tools. Number 3, and under the agent, still under the agent governance umbrella here, use the Copilot page. This is something that I have to tell myself every other day because I'm the old curmudgeon that still goes into my classic screens and I know where these buttons are. But the Copilot page has a lot of capability. It has a lot of gives you a lot of visibility into these very specific controls. And I'll show you this live. So if you go into the Power Platform Admin Center and drill into that Copilot page here, if I go to Copilot Studio, no, I want to go to settings. Under the settings tab here, this is where I can see everything under the sun as it pertains to Copilot and agents. And this does span across, you can see the general Power Platform, you can see Copilot Studio, and then we've got apps, automate, and even D365 agents toward the bottom here. But I can slice and dice this. So if I wanted to take a look just at the Copilot Studio settings and some of the Learn material, this filters everything really quickly. And it gives me at a glance a lot of not just the sexier, latest, greatest, like you can see code generation, so code interpreter in Copilot Studio and some of the settings here, but it gives you that rundown on a per product basis. So I can slice and dice across the Power Platform, or as D365 might be introduced or adopted, some of those agents that are on board in those bigger applications, I can manage those, or just the basic Power Platform ones here too. So go check out the Copilot page, go check out the settings, and play around with what you can see and some of the reach that you have from a governance controls perspective. Still under the agent governance umbrella, start using Copilot Studio authors. Little typo, but use that setting. We just took a look at it. We don't have to go back to it, but that is just such an easy button when it comes to getting people wired up to get into Copilot Studio versus that onesie twosie per head assigning that $0 SKU or that license in the M365 portal on a named license basis. This is going to be so much easier. Number 5, now we're under cost governance. Determine your organization's billing policy needs. I say this because while it is very easy to configure a billing plan in the Power Platform Admin Center and then wire that up to specific environments, sometimes organizations have departmental specific or department specific needs, or they need to bill a particular agent or an environment to a particular department or organizational unit where financing is disparate. So if you can't or don't want to throw everything at your parent, your main, your root Azure subscription, you will need to have an internal conversation about how that gets split out because you point at the sub, you point at a resource container that's available in the Azure tenant. But if you only have the one subscription, then it will knock that one pay-go meter for against that resource. So talk with your team, think about how billing needs to be split out, and be prepared to work with your Azure team on your IT squad to try to figure that out and try to get a proper billing, like a subscription backend in place that you can then use and fly with the easy-to-use billing plan configuration experience in the Power Platform Admin Center. Just as a nugget, I said earlier, you should get out of the default environment. You definitely should, especially if you're considering pay-as-you-go agents, because you can't wire up the default environment for pay-go. You can allocate credits, And I will say, I just tested this last night, and I could add the default environment to a PayGo plan, but per our documentation, the scope of PayGo effectively hitting that meter and being able to use it effectively are only for production and sandbox environments. So if you're working in default, if you're working in a trial environment, if you're working in a developer environment, a personal developer environment, PayGo will not work. So make sure that you have your agent innovation living in a supported environment type if you're considering pay-as-you-go billing. Number 7, now we're getting into advanced governance. So don't just draw from your tenant pool when it comes to those credits in the allocation. Allocate and manage your prepaid credits. I can't stress this enough because it gives you multiple layers of control. So if I go to my licensing here and go to the agents, we just took a look at the screen a second ago. I can allocate those credits on a per agent basis. I can also allocate those credits to whole environments. So if I've got multiple agent proofs of concept running in the environments that I have, I can go ahead and see all my environments. So if I go to, as an example, my Contoso test environment, I can manage my Copilot credits and do the same that we just saw for the agent, like the agent level, the agent specific allocation. But you can also set up those notifications. And so if you want to be more proactive with your governance, if you want to be more proactive with your cost controls and your billing, there we go. This is the way to go. Could you just purchase prepaid packs and have them live at the tenant pool and then draw from the available capacity on an as-needed basis without touching any of this? Yeah, you could. But you're not going to get that more granular level of control if you're just drawing from the pool. So go in, set that up for your environment, set that up for specific agents, and you're going to be sitting in a better position. Now for advanced governance, just a couple of notes. We do have the ability to tap into both Defender, as you can see on screen here. I'm not going to drop in live for this, but you can tap into Defender for the cross-domain prompt injection attacks, the threat detection. So as agents are being adopted, as you're having more proofs of concept and they're getting off the ground and into production, you're going to want to secure that. And we have that capability with Defender. You can run with third-party options as well if you'd like to roll your own or bring your own. But then we also have more advanced networking. So if you want to set up IP firewalls, run some allow listing, maybe with some service tags, between Azure services, Power Platform services, or run these assets on your network, a private network, versus traversing public IPs that are available for everybody, we have those options. So you can get the governance foundations and security foundations set. You can tailor those agent-specific settings that we talked about, and then in an advanced fashion, you can sheathe all of that with the XPIA controls or the threat detection there, and some advanced networking capabilities in the mix. Under the advanced governance umbrella, again, App Insights. If you aren't using Azure Application Insights, go take a look. You get a ton of information. Now, you can find this stuff in Purview. You can find the transcripts, the session details, but you're going to get a lot more granularity with Azure App Insights, and then you're going to be able to run those Kusto queries and really slice and dice and get to advanced analytics and reporting that then comes back into your governance strategy over time, so you can use that to hone it, to refine it. And the last one here, under the advanced governance umbrella, again, I talked about computer use. So that next evolution of RPA, using a either Windows 365 or a bring your own machine to fire up a web session, go traverse some screens and pull data back into the agent to automate or to feed back to your users, or in an autonomous fashion, go do its thing with agent flows. So if you're thinking about computer vision, if you're thinking about taking that next leap or that next step when it comes to RPA workloads, and you're thinking about agentic orchestration for those use cases, just know that there are a couple of settings. There's this one in particular. Are you going to use a hosted image or a hosted machine for all of that automation, or are you going to bring your own? And there are some settings that restrict that. So what does this all mean? What can you do now? Um, Number one, I've said it 3 times, 4 times already. I'll say it again because it's vitally important. Develop and hone your environment strategy. Think about it. Set that, feel comfortable with it, set that foundation, and that's going to open up a lot more rapid innovation at scale with your agents. And Microsoft can help. So contact your account team. We can look at governance workshops. We can look at environment reviews, strategic planning sessions. Michael and I have been in plenty of those. We also have our wonderful cloud solution architects through Microsoft Unified Support, as well as options for dedicated engineering. We have professional services. We also can tap into our partner economy. So that's the world I came from 4 years ago and back. We have got a ton of great partners that can run these things too. If you've got a preferred partner or a partner of record that's already in-house, chances are pretty fair that they'll have somebody who can help out here too, or Microsoft can help orchestrate and align those resources. And those workshops, design thinking, Catalyst, you name it, are so important early on. And in the deck here, which we'll definitely share out, I've got some additional resources. So Power Platform well architected, security governance concepts for Studio. If you don't have the Center of Excellence kit installed, that link is there. We've got in HLS, we've got a Power Hug channel. A couple of people on the team, Scott Randall and some others, have done a great job of giving back to the community and bringing in compelling topics and speakers. I linked one here for John Landgrave's Scaling Power Platform with Effective Governance. You're going to want to check that one out. And then at the bottom here, our customer advisory team for the Power Platform and Low Code, our Power Cat team, has a fantastic AI webinars series, which includes evolving governance. That's included here. Deep dive into agentic governance, which talks a little bit about zoned governance and some other concepts. And then, hey, I included some use case ideas. These are agent use cases. These are low code use cases that my team has been a part of, but just to give you some inspiration and give a peek at just some of the blocks that we've been around when it comes to agents, low code, and the gamut. So that's it, man. Michael, we made it through. And I know there's a lot. I know that was a lot, team. I understand that we have 60 minutes and I had 40 slides. So we had to go at a really quick clip, but I tried to make it as high, medium, high level as possible. We'll have the recording. We'll be able to distribute this deck and some of the assets. And like we said, engage your team, pull Michael and I in, let's have a conversation, or we can find you the right folks to have those conversations, to set your foundations, to accelerate agentic innovation with the agentic platform across the spectrum of agents, and get to those advanced levels in posture and time. So I can't thank you enough for the time today. I think we're good.